In the dim light of a Salt Lake archive, a single photograph lies sealed in wax paper. It shows a family, the Fairmonts, taken in 1878. At first glance, it's unremarkable: mother, father, 7 children. But stare long enough and unease begins to spread. Their faces, all of them, seem too alike, not just siblings but identical, like a single face pressed into clay and stamped onto each skull. Eyebrows the same arch, lips the same thin seam, eyes staring forward with a mechanical vacancy. The archivist who found it in the 1930s locked it away, muttering, "This isn't genealogy, it's replication." What secret did the Fairmont family carry, and why has every official record of them been scrubbed from Utah's history? Section 2, Utah 1878. The isolated settlement by 1878, Utah was still struggling under the shadow of pioneer expansion. Settlements sprouted across barren desert valleys, built on faith, survival, and secrecy. The Fairmont family owned 200 acres of farmland just outside Fairview, a town never marked on official maps. Locals whispered of their harvests, impossibly large crops in soil others found barren, livestock that bred without illness. The Fairmont homestead was prosperous, too prosperous. Neighbors claimed they never saw the family buy seed, yet every spring their fields burst into life. But prosperity came at a cost. No child born in Fairview between 1875 and 1880 survived beyond the age of 3. Mothers wept, fathers cursed, and every grave dug in that cursed valley seemed to point back to the Fairmonts. Visitors to the Fairmont home described something unnatural in its halls. 7 children moved in silence, never bickering, never crying. Each spoke in identical tones, often finishing one another's sentences without pause. A minister's wife recalled attending supper with the family. She swore the children chewed in unison, lifted their spoons in harmony, and stared without blinking as though obeying an unseen conductor. It wasn't a family, she said later, it was a chorus. When her account spread through town, no one doubted her. They had all seen it too. Religion in 19th century Utah held power beyond governance. It defined existence. And the Fairmonts were considered favored. Ministers defended them when suspicion grew, declaring their abundance a gift from God. But rumors spread that the church had its own reasons for protecting them. Handwritten ledgers from a Fairview parish show dozens of anonymous donations, made in gold, each marked only with the initials F. F. Why would a single family funnel money into a church already rich with tithes? What sin were they buying forgiveness for? The first hint of the family's genetic curse came from a grave digger named Horace Wells. He confessed before vanishing in 1891 that he unearthed a Fairmont child's coffin to steal jewelry. What he found instead left him mute for weeks. The corpse looked not 6 years old, but 40, skin shriveled, eyes sunken, teeth rotted black. Yet the town had buried that boy just 3 days before. Wells fled town screaming that the Fairmont children weren't growing up. They were breaking down. Something was unraveling them from the inside out. Between 1878 and 1883, at least 14 townspeople vanished. Most were children taken from cribs or beds in the dead of night. No doors forced open, no footprints in the dirt. Only one connection tied them together. All lived within a mile of the Fairmont farm. Survivors spoke of glimpsing pale shapes moving at the edges of cornfields at night. Some swore they saw duplicate faces. Children they knew standing in the Fairmont yard, calling their names in familiar voices. In 1881, 3 hunters stumbled upon the Fairmont barn after hearing screams carried on the wind. The door was chained shut. Through cracks in the wood, they saw dozens of small figures moving in the dark. The hunters fled to town, dragging the sheriff back with them. But when they returned the next morning, the barn was empty. No chains, no screams, only the smell of blood and lye. The sheriff filed no report. The hunters left Fairview that week and were never heard from again. Hidden within university archives in Salt Lake lies a letter dated 1884. It is addressed to Professor Alton Briggs, a biologist rumored to have worked with human experimentation. The letter reads, "The Fairmont specimens remain viable though unstable. Replication exceeds control. They cannot be contained without outside intervention. No signature, only a wax seal in the shape of an inverted cross. What specimens was the writer describing, and how did a secluded Utah family come to know the language of laboratories? By the mid-1880s, Fairview was crumbling. Families abandoned their homes, livestock starved in pens, and schools closed. But in newspapers, the town barely existed, its name absent from state maps, its tragedies unrecorded. Survivors who tried to speak out were branded insane or accused of heresy. The church declared their accounts hallucinations and ordered silence. To this day, not a single official census lists Fairview. It's as if the land itself was erased. Only one outsider ever claimed to escape the Fairmont farm. In 1892, a girl named Abigail Porter was found wandering the desert barefoot, her lips cracked, her tongue burned black from thirst. Before dying of fever, she whispered her final words, "They wear your faces, they take your names, but they are not your children." The sheriff who took her statement burned the papers the same night. Still, Abigail's words live on in private diaries, warning of a contagion that steals not flesh, but identity. Historians argue that the Fairmont curse may have been more than superstition. Surviving sketches of the family reveal identical facial structures, matching even in adults across 3 generations. Inbreeding is too simple an explanation. Witnesses described features not merely similar, but carbon copies. Scholars suggest a forbidden practice, a replication of bloodlines through selective breeding, cloning before science had the words for it. The Fairmonts weren't a family, they were a factory. In 1895, an orphanage in Ogden reported a donation of 7 children, all under the name Fairmont. Their files list identical birthdays, identical measurements, even identical handwriting. Within weeks, every child disappeared from the orphanage without explanation. The building was closed by state order 2 months later after several staff members went missing. Official cause, structural collapse. Unofficial whispers, the Fairmont children had returned for what was theirs. Buried beneath the floorboards of the Fairmont home, excavated only in the 1930s, were ritual mockings. Circles of ash, bones arranged in concentric rings, and strange carvings resembling double helixes spiraling into infinity. These weren't symbols of faith, but of control. Whatever the Fairmonts were breeding, it wasn't natural. It was guided, but by whom and for what purpose? Documents uncovered in 1947 reveal that the Smithsonian Institution briefly held skeletal remains labeled Fairmont Collection. The bones were described as elongated, uniform, and without normal variants. Within months, the collection vanished from records. A single archivist later confessed they weren't bones, they were molds. But his testimony was dismissed, buried under the weight of America's need to appear sane. Those who lived near the Fairmont property described recurring nightmares, dreams of being copied, of seeing themselves standing at the foot of their beds. Entire families suffered identical visions. Psychologists of the era called it contagious hysteria. But could hysteria carve the same dreams into dozens of minds? Could mass imagination make mothers wake screaming, convinced their children had been replaced? In 1901, the Fairmont estate was set ablaze. Witnesses claimed they saw figures in the flames, hundreds of children screaming in unison, their voices blending into one endless note. When the fire burned out, not a single body was found. The town claimed the Fairmont family perished, but without remains, their deaths could never be proven. Some believed the fire wasn't destruction, it was release. Declassified papers from the 1920s reveal the U.S. government briefly investigated Fairview. Agents noted possible genetic anomaly and risk of replication contagion, but within weeks, the files were redacted. A single phrase remains: project abandoned, containment incomplete. Did the government destroy the Fairmonts, or did they simply lose control of them? Even today, descendants of Utah settlers claim strange encounters. Families report children born with eerily identical faces, their features so uniform that strangers cannot tell them apart. Hospitals dismiss it as coincidence, genetic luck, or statistical anomaly. But for those who know the Fairmont legend, these births are not luck. They are echoes. The Fairmonts represent something deeper than bloodline corruption. They symbolize the fear of losing the self, To see your child's face repeated endlessly, to know that individuality, our anchor of existence, can be stolen, replicated, and emptied of meaning. The Fairmont story forces us to ask, if a face can be copied, what of the soul behind it? We return to that photograph, the one sealed in wax paper. The family sits together, eyes blank, lips tight, faces identical. But now look closer. In the far right corner stands another child, one not listed in the family registry. The face is blurred, the body faint, as though it wasn't captured by the camera but forced itself onto the film. No one knows who that child was, or how many more were standing just outside the frame. And that is the legacy of the Fairmont family, America's most disturbing genetic secret, buried in silence, denied by institutions, and yet still breathing, somewhere in the shadows of our history.